Hello, my name is Maxine. Welcome to my first critique. This isn't my first video ever, but it's the first time I'm actually trying to make something worthwhile. I want to start off with saying that it's very easy to criticize Cyberpunk. I mean, its release is such a mess. CD Projekt Red obviously knew how bad the game was at release, and honestly, it's way too easy to criticize the game in the state it's in, so I'm going to be hopeful and assume the bugs will be fixed, and will be excluding the bugs in this critique. I will, however, be including things I believe will not be fixed, like the AI. Also, this is my first real experience with a CD Projekt Red game. I don't really have a strong opinion about their games, other than I didn't like The Witcher 3, but that won't affect this critique at all. Alright, I'm going to break this into a few sections. Section number 1 will be gameplay and mechanics, and then section number 2 will be story, and we'll finish off with section number 3, which will be my final assessment of the game. Now we'll move on to the first section of the review. Keep in mind, I will be spoiling the game. Cyberpunk plays very similar to the Deus Ex games, which is basically that it's a first-person shooter where you have many paths throughout an area and you choose how to get through it. Whether that be stealth, hacking, running and gunning, basically you have a huge set of tools and you decide which ones you want to use. There have been many games like this, and the bar is set very high for it to impress anyone. Alright, let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay is basically you completing quests for people. It's almost always just going to a place, taking out all the enemies, you grab an item or person, and get out. And that consists of the majority of the content in the game. There are a bunch of interesting side quests that I enjoyed, but the majority of the missions in the game are the same copy-pasted format that just gets boring after a while. There are many ways to go about completing the missions, and I chose to be non-lethal. And I decided to do stealth, because I like playing stealth in games. Though, let me tell you, stealth in this game is not good. In fact, it's quite the mess. This game has some of the worst stealth I've seen in any game. I had so many times where an enemy saw me through walls, but couldn't see me when I was just to the side of them. I'll get more into the AI later, but the stealth is sometimes rewarded in the game through objectives like do not get detected or do not raise the alarm. But the thing is that those rewards are really bad. It gives you an extra 500 currency usually, which is a very small amount, and as I'm about to talk about, is completely worthless. Which brings up my next point. Throughout the game you get a completely useless reward known as Eurodollars, which were nicknamed eddies. Eddies are basically the game's currency, and the reason it is worthless is because there isn't much worth spending it on, which at first glance might not seem to be true, but I will back up my claim. You might think, hey, you can buy cars, clothes, guns, melee weapons, cyberware, and yeah, you can, but why would you? It's a huge waste of money. The game is basically a looter-shooter. You kill enemies and they drop better weapons the higher level they are. You will be constantly swapping your weapons out, so why would you even consider buying weapons? This is also the case with clothes and melee weapons. There is just no reason to spend money on them when they get replaced so quickly, and, as I'll talk about later, don't even mention the crafting upgrade system. So, what else is left? Well, that leaves vehicles and cyberware. Technically, you don't need to buy any vehicles because you start with one, though it takes a while for the game to give it to you. Though, if you wanted to buy a cool vehicle, you still don't have to. In the game, you get many free vehicles, not just one. I have not bought a single vehicle in the game, and I have 7 different vehicles, a few of which look really cool. There's no reason to buy a vehicle when one of the coolest ones in the game is free. These free vehicles are found by completing missions, and one of them by exploring a mission area after the mission is over. Which brings up the biggest reason why eddies are worthless. Everything expensive in the game, the strongest items in the game, the best cyberware in the game is all free. You can find almost all of the best cyberware out in the city, always in some kind of mission area, and the same rings true of guns and clothes. So there isn't a reason to buy anything. Seriously, why would I spend 100k eddies on legendary mantis blades or monowire when you can just find both of those hidden in the city? So yeah, eddies are worthless, and that is a bad thing, but the fact that you can find these items in the open world is actually a good thing. I like that kind of system. So that part is good, but the economy of the game is terrible. All expensive stuff is free, so there's no reason to spend your money on anything expensive. Or, well, just anything really. You might use your money a little here or there, but overall you're going to be gaining a lot more than you're spending, because there isn't much that needs to be spent on. So basically the reward for side quest feels empty, because it's a waste of time. Sure, you have a chance of finding something good in the mission area, but you have to be constantly looking in every small location, and that gets boring after a while. So now I'm going to talk about the skill system in the game. Cyberpunk 2077's skill system consists of 5 attributes, and 2 to 3 skills per attribute. and every skill has its own skill tree. As per usual, when you complete missions or kill enemies, you get experience. Now something interesting is that this game uses 2 leveling systems, not just one. You have the attribute system, where you level up an attribute by putting points into it, which you get from leveling up. Then you have skill leveling, which is basically a system where you level up a skill by doing the skill. You level quick hacking by quick hacking, you level stealth by doing stealth. When you level a skill, sometimes it gives skill points and sometimes it gives buffs to the skill. When you level up overall, it gives you an attribute point and a skill point. The system has been used before and it can work, and honestly it works okay in this game. It's not fantastic or anything, but it's fine. The skill buffs are very small, and when you level a skill to level 20, it unlocks a special skill you can purchase. The problem with this is that almost all of the special skills are really bad. Why aren't they special abilities or something cool? They're just small buffs that usually aren't that useful. Leveling a skill to level 20 takes such a long time. I have over 80 hours in the game, and I use stealth most of the time, and my stealth skill is only level 17. It takes far too long to level up skills. Though, as I said, leveling them isn't that important, thankfully. But if someone were to level a skill to level 20, then they basically wasted their time, because the level 20 special skills are all bad. So there is no reason to level a skill to level 20. You actually don't have to level up skills to purchase all but one of the skills. You have to level the attribute. There are also skill checks in the game, and I think they're neat, but it feels like there are more strength and engineering checks than anything else, which sucks, but honestly it's not that big of a deal. Overall, the skill system is okay, which is fine, but I really enjoy good skill trees in games, but I won't knock the game down at all because of it. Because fine is fine, and it isn't bad or really good. Now I'm going to move on to how well the shooting is. Okay, so I don't really have enough experience with shooting games, but from the experiences I have heard from many people who play the game, they find that the shooting is from mediocre to bad. Apparently there is an issue where your first shot misses and subsequent shots are all accurate, and apparently it's purposefully put in the game, because it is the type of shooting system they chose for the game. Only one person I know actually knew about this issue a lot, but a lot of people have mentioned how their shots feel like they just miss when they shouldn't have. I had no problem with this, so if you're like me and don't really play a lot of shooters, then you might be fine with this. But if you do play a lot of shooters, then you probably won't like the shooting in this game. Other than shooting, the quick hacking is fun to do, especially if you have the more powerful ones. Another problem with the combat is the music. The music is fine, it's just hearing the same song over and over and over again is just bad. Maybe add some variety, I don't know. Okay, so enemies are not tailored to your level, instead they are the level of the designated area, which can work, but it feels very underwhelming in this game. Some missions turn into a waste of time if you don't do them right away, because they're too easy later on. Though this is a problem in a lot of games, I still think it's worth bringing up. Overall, I personally enjoyed the combat in the game. It does get boring after a while, much like most of the things in the game, but anyways, that's all I have on that, so I'll move on to crafting. Alright, so currently the crafting is very bugged. You can scrap items to get more resources than it costs to craft the item. But of course that'll be fixed, and then the crafting will be really bad. Upgrading weapons is very, very expensive, and the upgrade is very small, so basically upgrading your clothes or weapons is next to worthless without cheating. There is almost no reason to upgrade your weapons or clothes when you're going to be constantly getting better ones from killing enemies anyways. There is also clothes and weapon mods, which are basically worthless until you get the skill that allows you to get mods back after scrapping stuff. I mean, you can use them if you want to, it's just the stuff you wear will get replaced, and you'll lose the mods you put on the worst gear. That's all I have on that, so I'm gonna move on to AI. The AI, as I said before, is full of issues. Their cone of vision seems to go very high. There is also the issue that car chasing is broken and likely won't be fixed because they probably don't see it as an issue. My biggest issue with the AI is that when combat mode activates, it seems as though it doesn't end until everyone is dead, or at least that's the case most of the time. Sometimes it works how it probably should, and when you hide, combat mode ends, but the majority of the time, combat mode continues on for a very long time. One time, I got spotted, combat mode activated, so I got on a bike and ran away. I ran halfway across the city and combat mode was still happening. It was just terrible. This is another thing I'm afraid they don't see as an issue. Also, when you're in combat, enemies always know exactly where you are, no matter what. You could have gone into a building, gone out the other side, run around the outside of the area hiding around buildings, and they will still know your exact position. It's overall really bad. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the open world. The open world is full of secrets, as long as you're in a mission area. It's full of missions, people to help, crimes to stop, and once it opens, it's huge. It's also very pretty, so much of it looks very good. The one issue is there isn't any fun to be had just messing around. The only thing you can do in the open world is with a joy toy, which is basically a prostitute, which is just stupid. There aren't any fun games or anything exciting. I mean, this is a cyberpunk setting with awesome flying cars, huge buildings, and so many awesome locations, but there isn't anything to do in the open world that isn't just a mission. It's just terrible. The city feels almost dead. Sure, there's Brandon, the talking vending machine, or that one guy who spews conspiracy theories, but that isn't enough. A city should be breathing with stuff like that, but it has almost none of it. The city feels dead, like everything is just a lifeless civilian, or a mission, or a shop. There isn't anything interesting. They had so much potential, so many opportunities, especially with brain dances. What if we got to play some awesome brain dances, or some really cool virtual reality games? I mean, anything would have added flavor to the game, but there's none of that. The open world is just overall bad, lifeless, and there is no reason to be in it after you do the missions in an area. But anyways, let's review. The skill system is fine, but overall pretty disappointing. The rewards for missions are terrible, and the missions get boring after a while, so there ends up being no reason to do them. Barely any of the side quests are good, but there are a few good ones. The gameplay loop is just the same thing over and over again. It never adds anything new or interesting. The AI is horrendous and will more than likely never be fixed because they probably don't think it's an issue. The AI is so much worse than I can ever explain here. I suggest watching other people's videos on this to see just how bad it is. The shooting is, well, full of holes. The crafting is very unbalanced and far too expensive. Money is basically worthless. The open world is dead. It feels like they didn't put any thought into it. Honestly, overall it feels like they didn't put much thought into the game at all, though maybe that's a bit too critical. I'll move on to my assessment of this section. So, finishing up with this section, I want to say this: even with all the problems in the game, I still enjoyed the first 60 hours I played. I actually had a lot of fun playing it. These issues are really, really bad, but I had fun for a while, though also some of the bugs are partially the reason why it was so much fun, because many of them are ridiculous. I don't like rating games because I never really feel like I can give a game a correct rating, but for this gameplay section, it either gets a 5 or 6 out of 10. Now it's time to move on to the story. This will, well, spoil the story. Okay, so this section's going to be a lot shorter because there's less to talk about, but I'll try to be as thorough as I can. Not only will this section spoil Cyberpunk 2077, but it will also spoil parts of the Batman Arkham series, but most notably so Batman Arkham Knight. So starting off, the game kicks off with a choice between being a street kid, nomad, or corpo. Whatever you choose will give special choices and dialogue for the rest of the game. It isn't that important overall, but it is a nice touch that I like, but I do not believe it is worth doing an extra playthrough for. Anyways, I chose Nomad, and I thought it was fine. I'm very new to critiquing, so I'm not sure on how well the dialogue is, but I don't think it's terrible. I mostly think it's mediocre. Though, after you get out of the start, the dialogue gets a bit better. Overall, I like the start, but I'm easy to please. I know that not everyone enjoyed it. In all the starts, you meet Jackie. It's pretty obvious right from the get-go that he's gonna die. The whole first few hours of the game is basically a huge tutorial where only part of the city is open, and those first few hours actually took me about 8 hours to get through because I wanted to do the side stuff first. You do a large heist, it goes wrong, which was very obviously going to happen. You're blamed for killing what is basically a big bad guy. Jackie dies, and you put this relic you stole into your head. Then, the guy who set up the heist kills you, and you come back to life. I'm not going to give the entire story, I'll just give some parts and my thoughts on them. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the relic business. So something I've noticed that, to my knowledge, no one else has, is that the whole relic stuff is just ripping off Batman Arkham Knight. I'll give the rundown of what the relic is. The relic is a chip that is in the protagonist's head. It is slowly killing the protagonist's mind and turning the protagonist into Johnny Silverhand. This is shown throughout the game by the protagonist doing things that Silverhand would do, showing that their personality is slowly changing. You also get to see Johnny and talk to him, as he appears as a hallucination that comments on certain missions throughout the game. It is a very interesting concept, and if it were original, I would have liked it. So now I'm going to spoil Arkham Knight. In Arkham Knight, you play as Batman, who in the story was infected with the Joker's blood, which is slowly turning Batman into the Joker. In the game, you get blasted with fear gas, and for the rest of the game, the Joker is a hallucination that talks to you. The Joker makes comments while you're doing missions, and acts as a very interesting part of Arkham Knight. Honestly, I think Batman did it better, mostly because they gave the Joker a lot of voice lines, and in Cyberpunk, Johnny barely talks outside of story missions and main side missions. He appears a lot, but a lot of the time he doesn't even say anything, and it is very awkward. Overall, the relic part of the story feels a bit like it was stolen, so I don't like it very much. Now I'm going to move on to brain dances. Brain dances are very interesting, but they also feel very unoriginal. In a brain dance, you basically watch a 3D video recording, and you can free cam fly around, and you can pick up details from the recording. A lot of people noticed that this was done in Detroit Become Human, and it was, but Batman, Arkham Origins, and Arkham Knight did it first to my knowledge. And since the relic stuff feels stolen from that game, I feel as though it's more likely they took it from the Batman series. But anyways, that's two huge parts of the story just ripped straight out of the Batman games, so Cyberpunk isn't looking too good, though you could probably argue that the relic stuff is inspired by Arkham Knight, but it feels more copied than anything. Anyways, I'll move on to the characters. The characters are the best part of this game. I really enjoyed Judy. I also really enjoyed Panam. I also loved working with Takamura. He was a great character, and I was glad I saved him, even though he later told me to rot in hell. There were a few others, but most importantly, the thing is that this game has good characters. The romance options were fine, it's neat, but it's not really amazing or anything. I think the most underdeveloped one is Rivers. You get just 2 real missions with him, and then you're together. It was very quick and sudden, but honestly it's not that big of a deal. Judy was the most fleshed out romance option in the game, and Panam came second in that respect, mostly because with Judy, you got a lot of missions to work with her, and it's built up a lot more compared to Panam and River. I didn't really experience Carrie's romance, so I don't know much about it, but it seems as though it's on par with Panam. I thought the voice acting was really good, though once again I'm new to this, so I can't be sure, but at least I really enjoyed it. Female V's voice actor did a really good job. I just wish there was more of a range of how she talked. Something just doesn't sit right for me there. I don't know much about male voice V, but from what I've heard, it seems to be a bit worse than female V. Like, seriously, he sounds like he's trying to impersonate Jensen from Deus Ex. That's sort of all I can hear. I really don't like it. Now I'm going to talk about the story overall. The story is very predictable. I've read a lot of books, so I know how stories tend to go, and this one went in the exact direction I thought it would. Nothing surprised me or came out of the blue. Most of the important things that happened were very obviously going to happen. I do think the heist mission was fun. I knew Jackie was going to die, but I was still sad about it. I like the system of a character being introduced by the story, and you get to choose whether or not to get closer with them by doing their side quest. Overall, the story is just okay. As someone who wants to be an author, I hope I never make something as predictable as this. What I really like in stories is when something new is introduced in some way, or at least if there isn't anything new, then do what is used really well, and in this game that doesn't happen. Some of the story is done well, but those sections are very short, in such a small part of the game. There isn't enough done well in the game for it to be anything better than just okay, if not worse. Alright, I'm going to move on to the endings. The ending I got was very hopeful, with Judy and I going off together with the Aldecaldos, hinting at them finding a cure so V doesn't die. It was an okay ending, it wasn't fantastic, it wasn't really well done, it was mediocre. The other endings seemed to be significantly worse than the ending I got, which I think it's a little too easy to get a bad ending. I think it's pretty unfair for people who chose a different path. Becoming a Night City legend seems to be the second best ending, but seriously, why would you want to give control to Johnny at the end instead of finishing it yourself? That would have been lame. Then, Hanako honestly seemed like the best option, because I didn't want Panam to die, which she didn't, but I didn't know that at the time, but in the end I chose the Aldecaldos because I didn't want to piss off Johnny. Overall, the endings are okay, it isn't anything amazing, which really upset me because I was starting to become invested in V, and the fact that the ending wasn't very good was really disappointing. That's really all there is to talk about story-wise, without going into everything. I feel as though I covered everything I wanted to. There is probably a lot more to say, though. I covered the copying from the Batman games, how Silverhand didn't get enough lines, how I really liked the characters, and how the story was very predictable and unoriginal. Overall, the story gets a 6 out of 10. Okay, so now we're in the end of the critique. I had a lot to say about Cyberpunk, and I believe I covered everything I wanted to, though there's still a lot I didn't cover. Anyways, it's about time I gave my full assessment, but first I'll quickly go over everything I have mentioned thus far. Cyberpunk 2077 is a game full of AI issues, unoriginal ideas, bad writing, good characters, bad shooting, mediocre story, okay skills, really bad reward systems, gameplay that is fun at first but gets stale after a while, and honestly, I really don't know if they stole the idea of the relic from Arkham Knight, but it feels like a very original idea in Arkham Knight, and it feels weird that they would just happen to have the same one for this game. Overall, Cyberpunk is a mediocre game that I enjoyed, because I enjoy mediocre games. I acknowledge I had fun with the game for the first 60 hours, partially because I had a lot of free time at the time, and partially because the glitches kept it interesting. Saying I had fun with the game does not mean I think it deserves an 8 out of 10 or higher. I enjoyed the game, but I've really enjoyed bad games before because I have low standards for what I enjoy in games. There are too many problems to give this game any higher than a 6. It's a very mediocre game. Almost all of it is mediocre. I believe this game is a 6 out of 10, enjoyable but disappointing overall. Though if they fix the AI, which I don't think they will, it will be a 7 out of 10. I know I said I wouldn't talk about the bugs of the game, but they're a pretty huge part of the experience, so I will add this. With the game being as glitchy as it is, with the situation of its release, the game gets a 3 out of 10 in the state it's in. And it's in a very sorry state, just look at all the other videos covering the bugs. So, this was my first proper critique. I'm still in college studying to get better at this, so I know it's not perfect, but practice helps people get better, so I'm doing this. I hope I didn't upset anyone with this video. It's fine if you think the game should be rated higher, and I recognize that the game might change substantially in a few years, so maybe one day it'll get that 8 out of 10. If you enjoyed this video, I'll hopefully be making more of these eventually, so you can subscribe if you want to. Anyways, for now I'm Maxine, and I will see you another time.